Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. We're just going to give a moment or two for everyone to get in. If you can hear me, maybe you can put a little chat in the window, in the chat box in the bottom, just to let me know. Thank you, Melissa. Well, I think maybe it's time we get started. We're at 11:33 in Newfoundland and Labrador, so we'll jump right into it. And good morning, everyone. My name is Craig Foley, and I'm the CEO of Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador, the Tourism Industry Association for the province. I'd like to welcome everyone to our session today, particularly participants in Ireland, Iceland, Norway, and Newfoundland and Labrador, but indeed to others who have joined us from all parts of the world. We truly have a multinational event taking place. It's hard to believe that all of this began just over 13 years ago when Don McNeil, a Newfoundlander and Labradorian, moved to Donegal in Ireland. Don saw many similarities between the home place he left and his new home, and he created the Laurentic Forum as a way to foster and grow ties and connections between the two places. The Laurentic Forum itself has grown into a multi-day event covering a variety of topics, and indeed has expanded to include Norway and Iceland. I'm very fortunate to have a fantastic co-chair in Maeve Shorgay, Maeve Joyce, and together we will, in the next two seminars, be joined by presenters to discuss two main themes: intangible cultural tourism and digital storytelling. This is a webinar, and as such, all questions should be asked through the question and answer feature found at the bottom of the Zoom meeting window. I also encourage you to converse through the chat feature. Some cross-sharing between countries would very much be encouraged. And as a reminder, we are recording this session. It's now time for me to introduce our first speaker and the seminar facilitator, Dale Jarvis. Dale is an adjunct professor at the Department of Folklore, Memorial University, and the executive director of Heritage NL, helping communities to safeguard traditional, cultural, and historic places. Dale has been working for Heritage NL since 1996, and he holds a BSc in Anthropology and Archaeology from Trent University and a Master's in Folklore from Memorial. He served as the UNESCO consultative body to Intergovernmental Committee for Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage and regularly teaches workshops on oral history, cultural documentation, and public folklore. Ladies and gentlemen, Dale.
Thanks, Craig, and welcome. Welcome everyone who is tuning in from wherever you happen to be. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm here in St. John's, Newfoundland, and I'm going to be showing some slides, but I wanted to start off just with a little bit of a story I thought might be appropriate. And the story, I'll start it the way the woman who I heard the story started it. She always started her stories like this. She started it not in my time, and not in your time, but in a time when monkeys walked, talked, and chewed tobacco. There was a miserable old woman who had three sons. The first son, his name was Tom. The second son was Bill. And the third son, well, his name, for lack of a better one, was Jack. Now, the three brothers wanted to go fishing, but they had nar punt. They didn't have a boat in which to go fishing. So Tom, being the eldest, went to his mother and said, "Mother, fix me up a lunch. I'm going up country to cut down some trees so I can build a punt." And so she did. Baked him up some molasses, buns, sent him off. Off he went, and he walked and he walked and he walked till he came to a little stream. And he sat down on a rock and he took out his lunch and was just about to start when who should appear beside him but a wee little man, only about that big, came over and sat down beside Tom and asked Tom if he'd share his lunch. "No," said Tom. He said, "There's hardly enough here for me as it is." "Very well," said the little man, "so you shall have your reward." And he disappeared off into the woods. Tom finished his lunch and he picked up his axe. He went over to a beautiful tree, perfect for the keel of a boat. And he gave a great swing with his axe. And when his axe hit that tree, the tree broke into 1,000 pieces, as if the tree was made out of glass. And he went to the next tree and tried the same thing, but that tree broke into 1,000 pieces as well. Every tree he tried was the same thing. And he put the axe on his shoulder and went home, muttering all the way about how the little man put a spell on him. Well, the next day, Bill decided he'd try his luck. So he said to his mother, I'm going up to the country to cut down some wood so I can build a punt. And so his mother baked him up a lunch. Off he went, and he walked till he came to the same spot, sat down on the rock. And he was just about to eat his lunch when who should come out of the woods but a little man came over and sat down beside Bill and asked Bill if he would share his lunch. Go on, said Bill. I know what you did to my brother. You're not getting any lunch from me. Very well, said the little man, and so you shall have your reward. And he disappeared off into the woods. Bill finished his lunch, picked up his axe, went over to a fine-looking tree, took a great swing with the axe, but when the axe hit that tree, it rang in his hands as if the tree was made out of iron. And the next tree was the same thing, and every tree in the forest, it was as if they had all been turned into iron. And so Bill went home and muttered all the way about how a little man had put a spell on him. Well, the next day, Jack decided he'd try his luck. So he went to his mother and said, Mother, make me up some lunch. I'm going up country so I can cut down some wood so my brothers and I can build a punt and go fishing. And his mother said, Jack, she said, you ashy cat, the back of the stove is the best place for the likes of ye. You'll get no molasses buns from me. Now, Mother, says Jack, I knows me rights. You fed my brothers, and so you have to feed me. Jack, she said, I got better things to do than to look after you. And she gave him an old dry crust of bread and put her boot in his arse and pushed him out the door. And off went Jack. And he walked and he walked and he walked till he came to the same spot, sat down, and who should come out of the woods but a little man. And he asked Jack if Jack would share his lunch. And Jack said, yes, why, you're welcome to half of it. And he took that dry old crust of bread and he broke it in half. He gave half to the little man and he had half for himself. And it was the best tasting piece of bread that Jack had ever had. And the little man said, Jack, why are you up here, way up in the country? And Jack said, well, I've come to cut down some wood so my brothers and I can build a punt and we can go fishing. Well, said the man, why don't you try that tree right there? So Jack went over with his axe, gave a great swing with the axe. When the axe hit that tree, the tree broke down into a pile of cut lumber lying right there in the middle of the forest. Well, that's a fine piece of work, said Jack. You're not done yet, said the little man. Walk around that pile of wood 3 times. And that's what Jack did. Walked around it once, twice, 3 times. And when he was done, there was a beautiful boat all planked out and ready to go. Well, said Jack, that's a fine piece of work. You're not done yet, said the little man. Reached into his little pocket, took out a little stick and gave it to Jack and said, touch that, both sides of the boat. And so Jack did that. And the boat was painted in 7 beautiful colors, all the colors of the rainbow. And the little man said, now, Jack, there you go. That's your boat. And Jack said, well, I never imagined having such a beautiful boat. And I don't mean to seem ungrateful, but here we are way up in the middle of the woods. What use is a boat to me up here? Ah, said the little man, this is no ordinary boat. This is the boat that sails without wind or water. And all you got to do is climb into the boat and say, boat rise, and the boat will rise up into the air and take you wherever you want to go. And when you get there, you shout out, boat pitch, and the boat will pitch down, nice as you please, right on the water. So Jack got in the boat and he held on and he said, boat rise, and the boat rose up into the air and shot off into the clouds. And he sailed and sailed until he saw no more green land, just water underneath him. And he sailed until he saw a bit of green once more, and he looked down and there was a beautiful garden. And there, said Jack, maybe I'll stop there. And so he cried out, boat pitch. And the boat pitched down, nice as you please, just like a feather landing on water right in the middle of that garden. And it turned out that the garden belonged to the King of England. Now, what happened with the King of England and the King of England's daughter, and what happened to Jack's mean old mother and his 2 brothers, Tom and Bill? Well, that's a story for another time. You'll just have to come to Newfoundland and hear that one for yourself. So what I'm going to be talking about today is this business of intangible cultural heritage? What is it, and why does it matter to places like Newfoundland and Labrador? And that story that I told you, I started off by saying it was a story that I had learned, I had first heard from this woman, a woman by the name of Alice Lannon, who is a great traditional Newfoundland storyteller, wonderful teller of stories. She's from Placentia Bay. Learned her stories from an older woman in her family, and she figured that the stories had been told orally without having been written down for hundreds of years. And that was one of her stories, the boat that sailed without wind and water. And I've heard a lot of other Newfoundland storytellers tell that story as well. The thing I loved about Alice's version was that she often said that when she was a girl, there was a float plane that landed in the community. First time anyone had seen a float plane land. And she said she remembered being a girl and looking up and thinking, oh my God, it's the boat that sails without wind or water. We've been telling stories like that in Newfoundland and Labrador for a very, very long time. And I like stories because I think they tell us a lot of different things, and they say a lot of things about the people who tell the stories and where the stories come from. I like that story is in some ways kind of about our fairy and legends and stories about magical helpers that we have in Newfoundland and Labrador. And on one level, that is kind of what the story is about. And there's always something a little magical about this business of boats and boat building, this idea that we can take something that grows out of the earth and turn it into something that we can use to explore the world. And that story that Mrs. Lannon knew, that she had learned from her grandmother and had passed down to the next generations of Newfoundlanders, that is an old story indeed. And lots of you may have heard versions of that story before. Flying boats are one of these things that are a part of world folklore, no matter where you're from. And other parts of Canada have their own versions of this story. In Quebec, they tell stories of La Chasse Galerie, the canoe that was charmed by the devil to take a group of lumbermen home for Christmas with disastrous results. And it's a story that is known in other parts of the world. There's Russian versions of this story, the Fool of the World and the Flying Ship. And I'm sure that if you are a student of folklore, there's lots of examples of these that are found from everywhere. It's a good example of intangible cultural heritage, these storytelling traditions that come from one place and fly and move to another place and take on a new life of your own. I know we have some visitors and presenters today from the Norse regions. So this is an old story indeed. Here we have the dwarves forging Mjolnir, Thor's magical hammer. And down there in the bottom right is another one of these magical flying boats. Freyr's magical boat that was so wonderfully constructed, you could fold it up and put it in your pocket. And these stories have a way of living and changing and flowing from one generation to the other. And those of you who are Marvel Cinematic Universe fans will certainly recognize that these ideas of flying boats exist in today's iteration of those ancient stories. We've been making boats and building boats in Newfoundland and Labrador for thousands and thousands of years. And there's all kinds of stories about who may have come by boats first. Probably the first people to arrive in boats were the ancestors of the Inuit people of northern Labrador who arrived. They were coastal people and arrived in umiaks, their skin boats, thousands and thousands of years ago, and still maintain a skin boat tradition today. If you believe those scandalous storytellers, the Irish, they will have you believe that the first European to arrive here was Saint Brendan there at the bottom, who arrived in his leather coracle many years before. And if you believe the Norse, you will understand that it was the Vikings who came around 1001. and built settlements here on the northern peninsula of Newfoundland and Labrador. So we've had local building traditions and visiting boat building traditions for a very, very long time. This is one of our Norwegian visitors, I think, in 2016 that sailed to the northern peninsula. Boat building, I think, is a really good way to think about this business of intangible cultural heritage. A boat is a tangible thing. But the knowledge and the skills, the information that lie behind it, the body of work that is necessary to understand in order to build these things is a really good example of what intangible cultural heritage is. This is a boat being launched in Spaniards Bay in the 1940s. So we can think of the boat as a tangible object and all those things around it that help us understand boats and boat building and boat builders as being part of our intangible cultural heritage. All that knowledge that goes into understanding how boats are made is part of that tradition. In 2003, UNESCO created what's the word I'm looking for? A convention on intangible cultural heritage, the 2003 Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage, which many nation states have signed. Canada has not yet signed it, but many of our partners around the world have. And it kind of describes 5 what they call domains of what intangible cultural heritage is. And the first one is that idea of oral tradition, this idea of oral knowledge, of storytelling, our language traditions, our vocal traditions of play. So all that work, if we're thinking about boat building, of all the stories around boats and boat builders. The other second domain is what we think of as kind of performance-oriented traditions, singing and dancing traditions, performance traditions. And anyone who has attended a traditional Newfoundland boat launch know that this is just as much a part of the tradition as anything else. Newfoundland boats are often launched with the singing of a traditional song called the Jolly Poker or the Johnny Poker. And this is Mr. Edwin Bishop here with one of his boats, and I was lucky to be at his last boat launch where, sure enough, people sang the Jolly Poker. One of the other things that we look at when we think about intangible cultural heritage are cultural traditions, our social practices. And in Newfoundland and Labrador, we have a rich calendar of customs that happen from New Year's Eve to Christmas, a whole pile of wonderful traditions that were brought over or which evolved here over thousands of years. This is an example, maybe not the finest thing to show a boat builder, but an example of our bonfire night traditions. What do you do with a boat when it can no longer float? Well, you set it on fire on November 5th, part of that ancient fire tradition that we still celebrate in Newfoundland and Labrador. The other piece of intangible cultural heritage is the knowledge we have about the universe. David Taylor, the American folklorist who did a lot of work on that the Wooden Boat Museum used, he often talked about people being able to see the boats in the trees, that someone could, a boat builder could walk into the woods like Jack and his brothers and know the right trees to pick from and what time of year to harvest them. This is Mr. P.N. Panashwe, the late canoe builder, Innu canoe builder from central Labrador, who had all that embodied knowledge around nature and the land and the sea. One of the reasons our boat traditions evolved and changed here in Newfoundland is that boats were often adapted to fit local conditions. So you might have a boat style that kind of went from one place to another, and local boat builders were very adept at tweaking and changing and modifying things based on their understanding of local sea conditions and landing conditions. This is a photo from Tilting, one of our old Irish communities on Fogo Island. And this is another great example of just people having a tremendous knowledge of local materials. This is a traditional Mi'kmaq canoe, which is under construction in Conn River. This is a picture taken a number of years ago. And if you look up at the top, you can see this bundle of spruce roots, the roots of spruce trees that have been peeled and split that will be used to tie this boat together. So the whole process of harvesting and when you harvest and how you harvest, all of these things are another examples of our intangible cultural heritage. And then the last one is just traditional crafts and arts, the building of things. So just as boat building itself is a skill, there are all these other skills that go along with it, like rope work and the tying of knots. Sailors and fishermen would know how to tie all these different things. The business of processing what we catch. So what you do with a salt fish once you get it, how you process it and how you turn it into something delicious to eat. Even the knowledge about how to build the things that we take our lunches with us. This is an example from the Canadian Museum of Civilization of a Newfoundland made lunch pail, and coopering skills. The building of barrels is one of the skills that Heritage NL is looking to reinvigorate in the province. So all those things together form our intangible cultural heritage. It is a shared knowledge of who we are and what we do. And with our Intangible Cultural Heritage program in Newfoundland, what we firmly believe is that preserving things for the community is kind of what our tourists want to see anyway. We're not as interested in developing skills just for the sake of selling them to tourists. We recognize that we do this thing to support our own communities. And in doing so, we provide opportunities for others to come and learn and experience our deep and complex cultures here in Newfoundland and Labrador. As the fairly new executive director of Heritage NL and as a public folklorist, I'm often inspired by this quote from S. Dillon Ripley of the American Folklife Festival, the founder of the American Folklife Festival at the Smithsonian, who had this great collection of musical instruments in glass cases. And he said, we need to take the objects out of their cases and make them sing. And I think all of the participants today, in their own way, are taking the objects out of their cases and making them sing and showing us new and interesting ways that we can start to think about tradition and craft and skill and allowing those things to sing and be passed along to the next generation, which is really what we're all about. If you have any questions or comments about Newfoundland and Labrador's Intangible Cultural Heritage Program and how that relates to the business of cultural tourism, you can certainly reach out to me, or you can reach out to the Heritage Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador. We're online, heritagenl.ca. So those are some things for you to think about as we embark on this journey together today, talking about the business and tourism benefits of our living heritage. And I think with that, it's my great pleasure to pass the oars over, so to speak, to our first speaker from the Wooden Boat Museum. And I'll let him take it from here. Jim?
Thanks, Dale. Talk about a lead-in. Thank you very much. I'll just get my presentation up here. Dale made a point of saying we don't have much time, so lots of pictures and less talk. So that's what I will try to do. So I am the president of the Wooden Boat Museum, and we'll learn a little bit about the museum and what we do. And I'd like to think that we're actually making all the things that Dale said come to life. Now, in this particular case here, in the cover slide, we built a half-scale boat for a high-tech marine engineering firm, and they wanted to look back to their past as they built for the future. Okay, preserving our heritage, can it make for good tourism? Well, let's see. There we go. First of all, you have to have a passion for this sort of thing. So I'm putting my case out there. I've been a long time small boat enthusiast, going back to the age of 8 or so here. So I come by this honestly. Wooden Boat Museum of Newfoundland and Labrador. Basically, we're preserving our tangible and intangible cultural heritage. Dale told you all about that. We do it in a number of different ways. We archive designs and stories of the traditional builders. We develop exhibits for our museum and for other museums who are partners with us. And we pass on boat building skills to all ages. Where are we? We're on the island of Newfoundland in Winterton Trinity Bay, which is about an hour and a half away from downtown St. John's. So we're around the bay. Dale mentioned David Taylor, who did his master's in folklore at Memorial University here in St. John's. He was clearly interested in traditional boat building. He came to Winterton because he heard it was a good spot for this sort of thing. And we ran into the Winterton Community Museum, which was a pretty standard museum, archiving artifacts from the community. And he said, you know, you guys are real boat builders. I think you really want to think about this. So the community museum kind of added a boat building component to it. And then 12 years ago, we incorporated it as a provincial organization, hence we're the Wooden Boat Museum of Newfoundland and Labrador. We have a summer season in Winterton. The museum is actually an old school on the main road. We employ a considerable staff. We're hopeful this year, after surviving 2 pandemic summers, that we will be back to our normal activity. And we're hoping to add new components to our program. We may put a lot of faith in our staff. They're summer students for the most part. So we have a training program, we have an assessment program, we have a weekly meeting program to make sure that we're all on the same page. There's a flashback. That is Outport, Newfoundland, back in the day when the boat was everything. And you can see that you know, the heritage we're carrying on is quite a beautiful one. These are the boats we build today. Typically, we're limited to smaller boats just from a practical point of view and a time point of view, but we concentrate on the punt or the Rodney. And Dale mentioned the Rodney that Jack had built up in the woods, and the Grand Bank Story, which has a flat bottom. Lots of activity. What do we offer? Heritage boat building skills. You can see these are just people off the street who have come to an event, and they're learning how to use traditional woodworking tools, tying knots, knitting nets, cutting fish, all those things that were a staple of life back in the old days. Encouragement for future builders. In the summer, we have 2 afternoons a week when we put on sessions for children 5 to 12 years old, and they do a lot of hands-on work and a lot of fun too. The boats they build in the bottom left there, they take down to the waterfront and sail at the end of the day. Hands-on boat building from the ground up. As you can see, lots of different kinds of boats, different people, different ages. And we've been pretty successful in our programs, and in our own small way, I think that we have passed on a lot of these intangible skills to create the boats that we love. I mentioned earlier that one of our first efforts is to learn about the boats, learn the stories from the builders. You know, we never got to interview Jack, but we've met a lot of fine old boat builders who have passed a lot of information on to us. We in turn have archived that at the Memorial University on our website, and in some cases we've developed pamphlets, and we've certainly created exhibits for our museum and for our partner museum in Twillingate. It's an example of our Boats and Builders page on our website. Dale showed a photograph of a field team taking the lines off a boat. We do that in a very, very systematic way with the idea of taking the shape of the boat and creating a table of three-dimensional coordinates that we can go back and plot the boat. Afterwards, there's some field activities. First comes a drawing and the table of offsets down at the bottom here, which is the basic shape of the boat in 3D. And then from there, we can develop the full lines of the boat, which take those initial measurements and the eye of the builder or the architect to create something beautiful. If you go to our boats and builders page, you'll see that we have quite a few boats up online. We intend to create more from other measurements we've made, but you can just see that these three punts are the same but different. And as Dale said, the designs are based on the needs of the community and the appreciation of those needs by the boat builder. So I've shown you some pictures of how we passing on traditional skills, basically using hand tools, lots of shaping. The boat that we build at Memorial University in our winter night course takes 12 weeks, 24 sessions to build. And we usually have about 10 or 12 people enrolled in that. And that's great. It's a really, really rewarding experience. But we're trying something a little bit different now. In the interest of using the boat and exposing more people to the joy of building a boat and then using it, we're in the process of developing the so-called kit boat, which is literally a boat in a box. Open up the box and all the parts you need are there. All you have to do is put them together. And we are at the point now where we have a digital design of not only the boat, but all of the parts. And each of these designs can be put into a computer-aided cutting machine, and then the cutter automatically cuts out all the pieces. And Jack was good enough to give me his kit boat. This is a model of the boat that we're building, and it's a lot of fun. We're really enjoying it. I mentioned the activity center earlier. We now have a complex of buildings in Winterton. The museum, which is in the old school, we built a 30-foot by 50-foot boat building shed where we actually build a lot of boats. We have another small building behind the museum, which we're developing as an activity center for all of these hands-on activities. We'll do the junior builders in there, but you see, we concentrate on boat design, navigation, use of hand tools, and knots and rigging skills. So we're thinking all the time about how we can expand our offerings and interest more and more people all the time. So yeah, we're a heritage organization, but we're in the tourism business as well. And so we take this seriously. And so every year we actually publish a visitor's guide about the museum, about our partners, some interesting stories, and we make sure that this is available in hotels, tourist centers, that sort of thing, and it helps bring people to the museum. I'm glad to say we were able to do this in 2021. In light of the pandemic, we were pretty bare bones on a skeleton crew, and we're still able to do this. Mention partners. We're all about partners. We obviously work with government agencies for funding and for projects. We work with industry organizations, publications, small towns. We've delivered boat building workshops in a number of small towns, and those boats are frequently used in the annual summer regatta. So it's a real treat to be able to see our dories on the pond or on the harbor in a small town around the bay. We have very firm relationships with a number of like-minded organizations, and that includes Canada, Europe, and North America, all throughout North America. And finally, the most important thing is we're getting into the school system. We're working with youth, and we haven't had any school children come to the museum en masse recently, but we expect that come September, with the pandemic restrictions reduced, we'll see hundreds of kids come out on a field trip from St. John's, and that's a lot of fun. So we're in the tourism business. How are we doing? Well, what do you think about that? We were very, very honored in 2019 to receive a National Tourism Award, and it took us completely by surprise. And you can see the fellow over there in the blue tie has got a big smile on his face. I think he was pretty proud of us. So remember, look after and learn. Where you came from is where you're going. There'll be time for questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jim. And if you do have questions, we'll ask you to post them down below. There is a Q&A button there in the Zoom screen, at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Type in your questions there, and we're going to circle back around at the end and answer all those questions. So from the Wooden Boat Museum, we will unfold our magical Norse boat and sail off to Norway. To Marion Larson, who's joining us from the Viking Museum. Marion, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you, and hello from Lofotr Viking Museum. We're trying to share our screen. We're having some problems. I'm not sure that I'm able to show you only one picture, but if you can accept this way, I'm just starting. If you look closely, you can see an 83 meters long house behind the Viking chieftain and his wife. The longhouse is reconstructed from an on-site archaeological find, and this longhouse makes the core of the museum. People visiting Lofotr Viking Museum expect to learn about different aspects of Viking Age history. We present knowledge about political history, artifacts and their use, everyday life and feasts, mythology, handcrafts, fishing and farming, sailing, trading, and travel. Many of these subjects could be recognized as intangible culture. Since we're not able to observe Viking Age activities or to interview people living 1,000 years ago, we must relate on interpretations of the sources available today. Our dissemination is first and foremost based on research, taking archaeological finds and written sources into consideration. Local conditions like Viking Age climate, sea level, and available natural resources must be implemented as well. Combining different sources, we try to give an authentic experience. Authenticity is our main concern. In addition, we wish to give our visitors entertainment and the possibility to participate themselves in Viking activities. Further, I'll give a few examples of activities at the museum and the corresponding sources to take into consideration. Yeah, here, one of our handcrafters is coloring yarn. Archaeological finds and written sources give us some information about the colors in use during the Viking Age, and also the social status connected to different colors. But when we try out the handcraft of coloring yarn, we get a better understanding of the details in the process. We call it experimental archaeology. We may change some parameters from one experiment to the next. This way we can demonstrate how the Vikings might have done it. Experimental archaeology is often used to fill in the gaps of our knowledge. In this example, it would have been important to use local plant material for the coloring. Here, the handcrafter is making a copy of an archaeological find from the Hasselberg ship grave. A tiny piece of cloth from an archaeological find can tell us a lot about the spinning technique, the weaving technique, the quality of the material, and the colors used. And sometimes we get enough information to make a trustworthy copy. the blacksmith at Lofotr Vikingmuseum at work. The smallest bits and pieces of iron from the Viking Age have rusted away, most of it. But when the preservation conditions are extremely good, archaeologists find iron items like belt buckles, fittings, hinges, rivets, and so on. Finally, archaeological excavations have uncovered amounts of weapons and tools made of iron. We have no problem identifying the blacksmith's tools from the Viking Age. They look almost the same as they do today. The archaeological finds of tools and iron items give us a good indication of what to make and how to do it. This is from a feast in the chieftain's hall. The meal is an important part of the event. The archaeology has given us knowledge about different cooking methods and the equipment used for cooking and serving, but we have no recipes from the Viking Age. The lack of recipes is a problem regarding authenticity. We solve this problem by using local ingredients and ingredients that the Vikings could have imported, like wine, honey, oils, and dried herbs and spices. The local natural resources are about the same today as they were 1,000 years ago. Also, the farm animals today are the same as those in the Viking Age. So when it comes to the serving of food, we have to compromise. We use the right ingredients, but not the right recipes. We, of course, avoid using ingredients like tomatoes, potatoes, corn, peppers, lime fruit, all these fresh ingredients that we can import and use in today's cooking. Another concern is health and safety. We need to follow strict regulations, which mean we must compromise when it comes to methods of cooking and cleaning. The closest we get to authenticity regarding the serving of food is to choose local ingredients and to avoid ingredients that the Vikings didn't have. A Viking feast is not all about the meal. It's about the smell of tar, the warmth from open fireplaces, the authentic decor, and the household's hospitality. Theatre and song are part of our dissemination in feasts. The songs we use are traditional songs with texts describing Viking activities. Could be both war and love. None of the songs are dated back to the Viking Age, but archaeologists have found music instruments which we use to accompany the vocal. We use drums and bone flutes, sometimes lyre. And the singing is very popular, but we can't claim that it is authentic. When it comes to theater, the elements of play vary with the situation, depending on what kind of group we arrange the feast for. Members of our staff have different roles in the play, and the content is about the Viking chieftains and his household's activities. Often some ritual is implemented in the play. Could be offerings to the gods or predictions and hope for the future. The content of the plays is based on research on written sources. Archery is one out of many activities we offer our visitors to take part in. We offer activities that the Vikings would have participated in, and we choose to use equipment made of materials that the Vikings had available. But sometimes we need to compromise due to economy. We have a few authentic archery bows made by handcrafters, but the equipment used by visitors are modern sports equipment for the most. Sailing the Viking ship is another activity we offer our visitors. As you can see, all on board are wearing life jackets, the crew wearing a more discreet kind of life jacket than the passengers. Health and safety for our staff and our visitors come first. This Viking ship is a copy of the Gokstad ship dated to the late 800s. The Gokstad ship is one of the best preserved Viking ships ever found. But still, there are a lot of details missing in the archaeological find. To fill in the gaps of our knowledge about the Viking ships, we do experimental archaeology by sailing the ships, trying out different sails, trying out impregnation of ship and sail, and so on. This activity may lead to adjustments to take into consideration in the research of the use of Viking ships. To sum it up, the research on the Vikings' intangible culture is based on archaeological finds, written sources, and experimental archaeology. Based on existing research, we emphasize authenticity in all our dissemination, but as we have seen, sometimes we need to compromise due to health and safety regulations or economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion. Now, we will continue with our exploration of Norway, and if we can pull her away from the big dog race that is happening right now, we'll turn things over to Katherine Hasselberg.
Hello, my name is Katrine. I'm 30 years old and I have my own dog sledding company. I'm not so used to doing this because I hate technology. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about my company, how I started it, and what we are focusing on these historical things. I have been driving with dogs since I was 7. I grew up mostly at my grandparents' house, and I got my own dog team when I was 14. When I got a little bit older, someone just called me and said, I heard you have nice dogs. Do you want to drive tourists for me? And I said, no, I will never do that. Because the only thing I heard about was this mass tourism you saw in the advertising, this beautiful woman driving alone in the mountain. Then you are coming to the company, you get just put on a sled with 20 others, go, come back, next, go. And I didn't want to do that way, because I think that that's not dog sledding. I wanted to use people to show people how we use the dogs, and a little bit more about the reality to being a dog driver. So I started to drive small groups and showing them a little bit about the dogs, how we prepare the dogs, and how to drive the sleds and these things. Yeah, we are located in north of Norway, really far north. So you couldn't believe people would like to live here. And a lot of people that we had coming were really interested in how people want to live here and why they came to this place. My grandmother, she calls us this Northern Light cocktail. We are a mix of all the people who live underneath the Northern Light. And the more tourists we got, the more people were interested in where we came from and what we did. So we started to tell stories about things from my grandmother when she was a child, and things from my great-grandmother when she was a child. And they were really interested in that. So I became my own tourist attraction. After a while, we had a lot more tourists and a lot more people who wanted to come. I worked at a school, so I wasn't able to drive all the people. So I had to say no to a lot of people. And I didn't want to advertise myself a lot because it would be bad if I have a lot of people who wanted to go and I didn't have the time to do it. After a few years, we just got more and more people, even if I didn't ask for them. So I had to take some days off work in the winter time. From 2017, I was working full-time with dogs. And I did all of this by myself until the end of 2019. Then I got my first employees. And I think the reason why a lot of people wanted to come to us was that because we had smaller groups, it felt more private. They got to know how dog sledding really was. They got to know us and the beautiful place we live on. Because the region of northern Norway has a very special nature. We have mountains and fjords and rivers and valleys, and within a quite short distance you can see everything from the coast to the deep valleys. And we also have lots of history. So you see, if you are used to dogs from you are a kid, it's hard to stop doing this. And we also have lots of things that have been happening in this valley. The Sami guy you see is actually my godfather. When I was baptized, I got 2 reindeers from him. I have no idea where they are now, but hopefully they have lots of babies. Maybe I can get them one day. And there you also see they are burning this tar and making these old traditional wooden boats. Now in the river, we can drive with motorboats. It's a lot easier. I prefer that. I'm very happy I didn't live 100 years ago. But in the older times, they used this, and with the sticks, they pushed themselves up the river, up streams. My great-grandfather, he was one of the first guys who started to have tourists up in the river with one of these boats. So they got Englishmen and people from other countries. They took up in what is now a national park to show them our beautiful nature. So people have been interested in this area for, at least as long as my great-grandfather lived. And we are also trying to make more people interested in our area. The road we are driving on from our farm is actually a part of the main road in the valley 100 to 150 years ago. The main house is close to the old house. It was burned down at the war, but we still have some remainings from it. It worked as a post office and a trading station where people further up in the valley could come and they could get groceries, they could get their mail, or they could ship things to the coast if they were not able to do it themselves. The roads were pretty bad from our house and further up the valley. So people, they left their wagons and in the summer and their sleds at our place before they went up to their house and their home. So it has always been a place where people was gathering, and we hope to build on that later. I was starting with a project in 2019 when I was able to afford to have people working for me, because then I could work more with these things. So we were planning on building a small museum with a little bit of information about all of these different things on our way of life, how we ended up here in the valley, what kind of people are we. A lot of our people are from Finland, and they emigrated from they had a big starvation. And then they mixed up with local people, with the Sami people, and these things. And then we are left from that mix. But also what people lived on and lived off, and what they did, because they did a lot of different things. We have a harsh winter, so they needed to use the summers to prepare themselves for the winter. They needed lots of different types of transportation. The Sami people, they used reindeers. Down here in the valley, we used horses and dogs to transport goods and things, and also boats. We are very lucky to still have a lot of this older equipment, especially farming equipment, that we want to try to restore and put on display. Unfortunately, because of Corona, we decided that we needed to use all our resources on keeping the dogs, because that's who I love the most. So we are a bit late, but I'm thinking when we are back, maybe in 1-2 years, where we have built up enough funds to start this project again, we want to do that, because we see a really high demand from customers, that they are interested in this kind of things also. They don't only want to do dog sledding, but they want to do dog sledding with a meaning. They want to learn something while they're out enjoying our nature. And because we are so lucky that we are located in a historical place with this old road, that we can show them still places where they lived, people, and also where my ancestors are from, I think it would be stupid not to use all of these things. And it's also good that we can encourage younger people to learn about our old traditions and history. I'm very lucky that my grandmother is still alive, because she knows a lot of stories and a lot of things. So I just have to be better to listen to her and write down so I remember. But I think that it's important that when we have the chance, we should do something about it. And we can also make money from it and work with the things that we love to do. And here you also have some historical people that are from our region. You probably know them, Seppola and
Kosten and Jafet Lindeberg.
Yeah, they did some amazing things with the dogs. They saved a lot of people in Nome.
Yeah.
But these dogs and dog sledding are not only used to save people, it's also a really important infrastructure in the older days. So we have lots of things to build on. It's just our imagination that puts our limits. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Katrina. I'm going to ask our presenters to come back, turn their cameras and their mics back on. And we're going to have a chat. If you do have questions, a reminder to put them down in the Q&A section below, and we will answer those as we can. And I love that idea of dog sledding with meaning. I think that's the phrase I'm going to take home with me today. That's great. I did have one question that I had sent around to everyone before we began, our presenters, and it was the idea around how do you maintain those skills internally? how do you ensure that your next group of employees or volunteers or staff, how do you ensure that those skills get passed along within your organizations and businesses? Does someone want to jump in? And Katrina, I know you said you're fairly new to having staff. How do you train in new people?
For now, we are very lucky because we have them living with my grandmother. They are
all sorts of it.
forced to listen to her. And also we have these bonfire nights where we drink some wine and talk. And they are very interested in our history and our culture and in dog sledding. So I've been very lucky so far because they want to know and they ask. And then I also have this story I tell on repeat every time we have guests. So they probably heard it now a few hundred times. I think they know it as well.
So wine and grandmothers, that's your
Yeah.
That's true.
Jim, how do you maintain your skills at the museum? How do you ensure that your staff learns new things?
Well, there are a number of different levels to this. For the museum itself, we hire summer staff, and we have developed programs to allow them to be knowledgeable interpreters. And some of the summer staff get to work with Jerome in the boat shed, so they take on some skills. And as I said, for the activity center, we're talking about a whole new host of different skills that our summer people will have to learn. And so part of the development is to develop a program there. But we're as organized as we can be. And of course, with a lot of students, there's a lot of turnover over the years. We try to keep the kids as long as we can, but that's difficult. On the boat building side, this is a challenge, and I know you're aware of this with your mentor and apprenticeship program. And Jerome is actually mentoring a carpenter who wants to build a boat, and so that's a really good way forward. We found that in our boat building workshops, in particular the winter night course, the 12-week session, a number of the fellows who go through that are interested enough they want to come back. And we've got 2 or 3 that are regular assistants for Jerome in the summertime, and with some of our winter projects, which we hope are going to be renewed after the pandemic now. So that's good. And I think the really positive thing is that our workshop training has encouraged a few of our attendees to go out and build their own boats. And so we've had some good success. I think in the photograph that I gave you showed a picture of a boat that Aidan Green had built. He did that all by himself. He sourced the lumber, he took it to timber, took it to a small mill to be milled. And we didn't know anything about it until he called me up and he says, I just put the last lick of paint on it, come and have a look. So that was really, really encouraging, but it is a challenge.
Marion, you referenced some very specific skills like weaving and blacksmithing that you have demonstrated on site. How do you find those skilled people, or how do you build those skills at the museum?
We usually find the skilled people. We employ people with the needed skills. So when it comes to the handcrafters, they're on their own when it comes to teaching. But of course, we have a lot of different categories of staff that we employ during the summer season. We could be as much as up to 100 people during the summer, and luckily not everyone has to learn everything because we have lots of different working stations. So someone gets employed for the museum shop, someone for the cafeteria, some is employed as guides, and someone has to have the right certificates to sail the Viking ship. So We of course have to have people with skills in a lot of different areas. And then we also have a very solid written down teaching program which concerns risks and regulations, health and safety, and all these things that everyone has to be aware of. But of course, especially with the guides who has to learn so much archaeology and history, both to use their manuscripts, but also to be able to talk with our visitors and answer the questions our visitors may have. We're very concerned, we're very happy if we get the old guides back year after year, and we also try to keep them through the winter, at least most of them, because it's so consuming to teach new guides.
Thank you. We have a general question for all the panelists about motivations for tourists. The question is, what in your experience are the key motivations for tourists to visit your projects? So in other words, what are your tourists looking for? Why do they come to you?
Well, I'll start, I guess. It's surprising how many people come from all over North America, certainly, because they're interested precisely in what we do. They're boat building enthusiasts. We've had canoe makers from Ontario and people from the States. And so this comes up in conversation. It's very gratifying. Others just drive by and say, I wonder what that is. We'll come in and have a look. But I think the most important thing is that we're well enough established that people know about us. We've been very successful in the media. And I think that I've been told several times that our cause really captures the imagination. It really is part of our heritage, and people like that. I've had people walk across the room to say that. I've been stopped in parking lots for people to say that. So I think really it's a matter of keeping at it and being known.
Marion, why do people come to the museum?
Yeah, there may be several motivations, but when we do our presentations and plan our dissemination, we hope to get visitors that want to learn more about the Viking Age. We have had a lot of visitors, most of them tourists, because the local inhabitants are not that many. But before the pandemic in 2019, we had 105,000 visitors. Most of them come during summer, and a lot of them are pensionists. We know, of course, that some people concerned about the Viking Age are Nazists, or they used to be. Maybe there still are some, and we try to do all we can to prevent them from coming. We don't necessarily know it if they're here, but we have strict regulations to how we use the properties. We do not let others use our longhouse, for instance. We don't let it out for rent. We need to be there. We need to stay there to make sure that what happens there is acceptable. So whenever something happens at the museum, it's the museum's own presentations, it's the museum's own dissemination. And we are also concerned when it comes to the Viking Festival, which we arrange once a year, to interview the participants to this festival to make sure that we get the right kind of people.
I understand. Thank you. Katrina, what kind of experience are people looking for when they come to you? And there was also a question specifically for you about how do they find you? Since you don't like technology, someone said, how much online marketing are you doing for people to find that experience?
I have no idea how they find me. Until recently, we had this web page because I'm working with this catalog that's fronting activities in Norway. And they said that you have a really good project, but it's impossible to find you. But I said, I'm home. But it was not enough, so we had a web page. But I also have a Facebook page. I have my guides. They are posting mostly on it. I'm not so good myself doing it. But it's just this last year I've been starting to advertise for myself. Mostly people, they just heard about me and they contacted me either by mail or phone. And a lot of people, they actually go from Tromsø. It's 4 hours drive one way. They go from Tromsø and back in one day just to drive dogs at our place, because they want to get away from this mass tourism and they want to experience something that's more personal and private. And they probably heard that it's fun to drive with dogs with me. I don't know. But I think we have a really good reputation. I've been doing this now for lots of years. And we always try to make it personal and private and share about our knowledge and where we are from. They look at me like this Inuit, like I belong far deep in the valley. I was probably born behind a rock or something, they think. I don't know. But we have never had problems finding enough customers until now, when we are expanding and I'm trying to hire more people so I can expand even more and do more of the things I like. So now I hope people can find me. They can find me on internet. Yeah.
Thank you. One question we had was around kind of funding and promotion. Do people get government support for the work that you do?
Museum Nord gets funding from both the state, the municipality, and the county. But of course, we also have to have a bit of income to be better able to invest in even better presentations and activities for the visitors. So what we get from the state and the community would be enough to pay salary for the employed, but to do something more, to get any development, we also need to have an income.
Jim, is there a certain percentage that the museum tries to raise on its own?
Oh, yes. I'm try to be a bit of an entrepreneur, selling experiences, etc., and promoting visitation. But we are a not-for-profit organization, and we do rely significantly on government grants, programs, etc. Some are straight grants from museum operation to offset our expenses. And I guess our most significant funding has come in the form of development projects. So we will write a proposal to federal and provincial government, usually combined, and outline the things that we would like to develop so that we can become more and more sustainable. And once again, we've been doing this for long enough that we're getting pretty good at it, and we're actually able to manage a certain level of sustainability. Once again, it's not for profit, it's a seasonal organization. We have to be light on our feet and very clever. But it takes time, but we have done it.
There was also a question about the kits that you're looking at. Are these, there was a question about, are these miniatures or are they full-size boats?
Full size. I answered that question in the chat. The actual boat will be about 15 feet long. And as I said, well, just as an example, the comparable punt would have probably 16 frames in it. This one will have 5, have 11 planks on each side. This one will have 6. And they'll all be cut out, and all you have to do is basically, it's stitch and glue construction, which means you stitch the pieces together and glue it at the same time. And you've got a boat. I've got a boat like that in my shop. And so we did some soul searching on this because we're so far away from that harvest in the woods mentality with this. I mean, we thought it was bad enough going to the lumber yard and using stainless steel screws, but this is completely turned around. But we made a real point between our builder and our naval architect to create a punt that would stand up against any of the designs we have in our archive. And I'm very proud of it. And as you can see with Jack's boat there, it really does look like a Newfoundland punt.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Craig for some final comments. And there is a question about speakers' contact information. Contact the Laurentic Forum, and if you have, and we can put you in touch. That's probably the easiest way to deal with that. I'll turn things over to Craig.
Well, thank you very much, Dale, for your facilitation and your presentation, and certainly to the other presenters, Jim, Marion, Katrina, for your excellent presentations on intangible cultural tourism. This session was an excellent example of how we can all learn from each other, and although the skills may be a little different, using those skills to create exceptional experiences can be shared across our partner countries. At this time, I want to thank everyone for their participation in this. The work of the Laurentic Forum is collaborative in nature, and it involves many organizations and some great people. Our steering committee includes Colleen, Connor, Dennis, Don, Elias, Heidi, Yanni, Joan, John A., John D., Juanita, Krista, Moya, Maeve, Stan, and Stein Arnie. I guess if we don't make a go of having these seminars, we have enough people to form a football club anyway, so we should be okay. I also want to thank Beth for her technical wizardry for this session, and also for Minerva for wrangling all of us cats as we're doing our work. I also want to thank the participants today who are watching. Without you, there's no purpose to such a session. It was also great to see people register from all over the world. It was just incredible to see where people are coming from. We hope you found this informative and beneficial to your operations and your business. On April 13th, another seminar on digital storytelling will take place. We will email the details to anyone who has registered today, but I also encourage you to reach out to your friends and colleagues who may find some benefit to such a session. As Dale talked about, we can also mail out a follow-up with the contact information for our presenters today, so you can get right in touch. This has been an excellent experience. We scheduled for an hour and a half, and we're going to give you back a few moments of your day, which I'm sure everybody will appreciate. But it has been a truly informative session, and I'm very much looking forward to the next one in April. On that note, thank you all. Have a great day and stay safe.